Right, we're going to move on because I do want to talk about what happened in the United States of America yesterday. At least 11 people have been killed and 6 wounded at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. Is the rise of these anti-Semitic attacks in Europe and the USA now at a crisis point? Why is it happening? Why is there a rise of extremism against the Jewish community? Let me know why you think it's happening on 0345 6060 973, or maybe you think actually it's hate crimes of all kinds that are rising, in which case text to 84850 and tell me, did weapons play a role? Is Trump right? Maybe had the synagogue been guarded? Would that have helped? I don't know. Please tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course watch us on Facebook. Comment there too. We're live from London next. Over the last couple of years, there has been a rise in reported anti-Semitic attacks in the USA and in France and in the United Kingdom and in Belgium. What happened yesterday in America, I think, is the worst of its kind in terms of attacks, deliberate attacks on the Jewish community. The massacre happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill, an historic Jewish district of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. The man involved was a 46-year-old man called Robert Bowers. Very quickly, he was linked to a series of anti-Semitic posts on social media and one or two comments. He said, "I do not vote for Trump. I've never owned a Make America Great Again hat." But he seems to have blamed Jewish groups for encouraging immigration and bringing in invaders that kill our people. So that appears to be what's behind this particular attack. I think it is the worst one that's happened in America, but to help us look at this and to try and understand whether it's right to think that there's a rise of anti-Semitic attacks, I believe there is, and why. Richard Ferrer, editor of Jewish News, is joining me this morning. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
Am I right in saying this is the worst attack against the Jewish group in America?
It is, and let me just start by saying, to those affected in Pittsburgh, my heart's with them. I spend a lot of time in shuls in my role as editor of a Jewish newspaper, and the thought of one of these places, being terrorised in this way is truly chilling. You're right; it's the worst one in America, attacking the Jewish community. But these outrages, as you mentioned at the top of the hour, they are all too familiar in Europe. There was an attack on a Jewish school in Toulouse where children were killed. There was an attack in the wake of Charlie Hebdo. Your listeners might remember the kosher supermarket attack. 4 were killed there. I could look back in recent years to Brussels, a Jewish museum. In Copenhagen, there was an attack in a synagogue during a bar mitzvah. These things have happened time and again in recent years, mercifully, though, not here in Britain.
But do we hear that here in Britain there are Jewish people having sort of, graffiti scrawled on their front doors, that this sort of thing is, there is a rise of general unpleasantness in this country?
There is. Luckily, it's on property and it's online. It's not on people. There hasn't been a fatal attack on a member of the Jewish community in this country, which is obviously, as I said, a merciful situation that we're in for the very simple reason that on the continent it's a clear and present danger. You've got the rise of Islamists in France and across Europe, the easy flow of weapons coming across the border from the Middle East, and luckily our borders protect the Jewish community just as they do the rest of British society.
You mentioned Islamists and the growth of extremism, and that perhaps is one of the key causes of this rise in anti-Semitism. But if I look to what happened yesterday in Pittsburgh, this guy is called Robert Bowers. He's a white 46-year-old. I don't think he's an Islamist, is he?
He's certainly not. No, in fact, I was just reading up on him. He had a completely unimpeachable criminal record. I think he had a traffic ticket 4 years ago. That was the only time he actually became someone that the police were aware of. He was anti-immigration. He was anti-Donald Trump, which seems a contradiction in terms. So yes, there's absolutely no instance here whatsoever of anything to do with Islamization or anti-Semitism in that area. The Jewish community has a triple threat. It is the target of the far right, it is the target of the far left and Islamism. Whether this character, Robert Bowers, falls into one of those remains to be seen.
Right, so you see 3 key sources here then of the growth of anti-Semitism: the far right, the far left and Islamism.
Yes, absolutely, and we see a spike in anti-Semitism when temperatures rise in the Middle East. In the last Gaza war in 2014 was when we saw the record number of anti-Semitic attacks here in the UK. I think the last 6 months have seen the second highest on record. Some are pointing to the rise in anti-Semitism in the Labour Party as one of the triggers behind that. There are scare stories here in Britain in 2018, but it is a safe place for Jews to live. People are not packing their bags here in the UK.
No, they're not. And Richard, I can tell you that just last week I was in Strasbourg, and quite early in the morning I was walking into the Parliament, and kids in France go to school quite early, much earlier than we do in this country, and I was walking through a district of Strasbourg, and Strasbourg's got the biggest Jewish population of any French city, pro rata. And I was watching Jewish children, I'm talking sort of 4 or 5 years old upwards, going to school, and there they have armed officers supporting them every single day.
And, well, it is the same here in the UK. I mean, you go across, there's about 7 or 8 big Jewish secondary schools in London.
Yeah.
They are all behind huge fences, barbed wire, CCTV. In France, after the 2015 attacks, I think something like 5,000 armed officers were guarding Jewish locations. Now, of course, if there were armed officers outside every Jewish synagogue, every Jewish community centre, I mean, it would be an appalling situation that we find ourselves in. The government already spends something in the region of £14 million a year guarding Jewish facilities. Quite how much manpower you want to put in front of this problem, I don't know. But I do maintain, Nigel, it is not the problem that we face in Europe here in the UK.
No,
yes,
okay. I completely understand that, and you've made that point very clearly, and actually in some ways quite reassuringly, I think, to people that are listening. Now, just lastly, Richard, we talk about supporting with fences, and I mentioned the example of children going to school in Strasbourg. President Trump seemed to think that maybe the answer for this, given the rise of anti-Semitism, is that actually, at each of these synagogues, there is somebody there on duty that is armed.
Look, culturally, I've never really got my head around the American fascination and love affair with guns. More guns is the answer. It doesn't seem to be any solution to any problem. Of course, in the short term, if you're going to have a lunatic, a psychopath, armed up to the teeth, intent on killing innocent people on a Saturday Shabbat service, then of course guns could potentially solve the problem. But this is the same man, of course, that said let's arm teachers in American schools because that would stop classroom shootings. So,
it's a very different culture. He also called for the more widespread use of the death penalty for people that behave in this way. Richard, thank you very much for joining us this morning. That was Richard Ferrer talking about the rise of anti-Semitism, talking about some of the appalling things that have taken place in France and indeed in Belgium, and saying whilst the situation is not great in this country, he certainly wasn't suggesting that we're anything like as bad, perhaps, as the rest of Europe when it comes to anti-Semitic attacks. Nicole is a new caller from Boreham Wood. Good morning, Nicole.
Hi, Nigel. This is the first time I've spoken to you.
Well, thank you.
I have called LBC before.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. So that it does appear, all the figures suggest there is a rise in anti-Semitic attacks, and Richard Ferrer there was saying that it comes from extreme Islamism, it comes from the far right and the far left. What on earth can we do about it, Nicole?
Well, I don't know. Look, I'm third generation born in this country. My grandparents were born here, apart from one grandparent. The whole of my father's family, so from his grandparents onwards, and aunties and uncles that weren't from this country, they were all murdered in Treblinka, in the Holocaust. So it's, anti-Semitism is very near to all Jewish people's hearts because one way or another, we've all suffered in history. But I've been saying for the last 5 to 7 years that it's been getting worse here. I've felt it. You can see it in new media, on Facebook, even on a site, British Politics, and those horrific things. I've had to take myself off it because it's upset me so much. What I don't understand is, where are the English people? Why are they not supporting us? Why are not the British people coming out and saying, Jewish people have been an inherent part of this country since William the Conqueror?
Nicole, I think a lot of people are, aren't they?
Well, some are, but not enough. And I
All
feel
right.
that Corbyn has legitimised anti-Semitism. Let me tell you, Nigel, that a few weeks ago, it just came to the top of my head. I couldn't stand it any longer. I spent 5 hours crying one night when all this thing was going on with Corbyn the whole time. I just thought, I just don't get it. I don't get it. We're not any trouble in this country. We pay our taxes. We really contribute to the UK. So why aren't people? Some people are standing up for us, but not a lot of people.
Well,
and
a lot
I
of it-
want to feel that.
A lot of it, Nicole, I think a lot of it does come down to perceptions over Israel versus Palestine. And you might have seen at the Labour Party conference that on one of the afternoons there, they were all waving Palestinian flags. And Jeremy Corbyn has been a really vehement critic of Israel and the way in which it behaves. So some of it, I think, does stem from perceptions over that conflict, don't you?
But no, Nigel, because yes, I do agree it does, but they use it as an excuse. They use anti-Zionism as an umbrella for anti-Semitism, because at the end of the day, have you been to Israel, Nigel?
No, I haven't.
Okay, please go, because, Majid has been, and he will tell you straight, Israel is a democracy where everybody lives side by side together. It's a load of lies what you hear in the media. And so, yes, when the war in 2014, but Israel had no choice, but it has over 1,000 missiles fired at its people. It had to go into Gaza. But of course, then everybody,
Yeah, I don't want to get, Nicole, I don't want to get deep into that conflict itself, because what I really want to talk about today is what we can do about this growing problem. And what you're saying to me is that you don't think enough British people are standing up and saying that Jews have been part of our society for decades, and we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. That's really your point, Nicole, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and I would like to hear more of that.
Okay, no, you've made it. You've made the point very clearly. Thank you. Well, Nicole feels not enough of us are standing up for the Jewish community. It's a very interesting point of view. More of this in a moment, but for now you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it is 11:15. The worst mass Jewish killing in the history of the USA is not a completely isolated incident. We have seen similar type of things happening in France, in Belgium, mercifully not in this country. The things here are far from perfect, as Rory points out on Facebook and says, in Gateshead, the Jewish community has private security in and around schools. That's how threatened they feel. And we were talking there about parts of North London where very similar things are going on. Certainly, a Jewish couple that I'm friendly with that live in Brussels have said to me, we're lucky. We're comfortably off. We live in a gated community. We've got 24-hour security. We're staying in Brussels. But friends of ours that are not as well off and can't afford to protect themselves in that way are leaving the city. And thousands of Jewish people have left Paris and Brussels over the course of the last few years. Why is this happening? Is it just anti-Semitic violence that's grown, or actually has racial violence of all kinds increased over the last few years, and what can we do about it? Omar is a new caller from Southwark. Good morning, Omar.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Farage. I believe it was Isaac Newton who stated that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Unfortunately, Jewish people across the world are paying a price for the evil that are being perpetrated by the Jewish state on Muslims in Palestine. On the 25th of February 1994 in Hebron, a chap by the name of Baruch Goldstein, an American Zionist Jew, immigrated to Israel, and on that day he killed 40 Muslims who were praying in the mosque in Hebron tomb of the patriarch, and he injured 150. Okay? There are YouTube clips of Jewish people, Zionist Jews, who actually acclaim that. They were applauding that act. What I'm saying is this: if Muslims are not safe in their own countries, then Jews will not be safe. If you want justice for yourself, you must want justice for others. The
Equally,
people in
Omar,
Palestine have been facing atrocities
Omar,
on a daily
equally...
basis and are facing atrocities as we speak now. They are being
Omar, hang on a second. There are two sides to this, and they're not, because there have been rockets being fired into Israel, all sorts of attacks that have taken place against Jewish people in that part of the world too.
Any attack, so-called attack by the Palestinians, on the state of Israel, pale into insignificance. You cannot in any way compare rockets, which in most cases do no harm, even Israelis accept this, to incendiary bombs and all other forms of bombs and weapons that have been used to kill them on a daily basis.
Are you suggesting, Omar?
Whatsoever.
Are you suggesting, Omar, this is the Israeli state?
Totally unreasonable.
Are you suggesting that it's the Israeli state that is responsible for these actions, or just certain individuals?
Well, you have settlers, don't you? You have unfortunately, again, the good always suffer for the bad. You have settlers who emigrate from all over the world, particularly in Brooklyn, New York, who go to the state of Israel and deny the indigenous population of their own rights. Is this something that you yourself would, in any way, shape or form, support? Would you like to be a recipient at the end of that kind of behaviour?
No, Omar, I wouldn't. But equally, I wouldn't feel that comfortable if I was a Jewish person living in Israel and I heard Arab leaders from neighbouring countries talking about the complete obliteration of my country. So I'm saying there were some pretty bad things said and done on both sides. But Omar, let me just ask you this. Let's take your contention that Israel behaves badly. And there is
not a contention. This is a fact.
All right. Okay. Let us.
Contention is a fact. Well, it's been going on since 1948. For God's sake.
If your fact is, listen, just hear me through. If your fact is right, and Israel have behaved badly, and people who've gone to settle in Israel, some of them have behaved appallingly, is it right that Jewish people living in Pittsburgh or Golders Green or Paris should suffer directly as a result of that?
Pardon me, could you repeat that? So I didn't quite hear you.
The point I'm making is,
yes,
even if Israel has behaved badly, even if some settlers there have committed murder and behaved appallingly,
yes,
is it fair that Jewish communities in Pittsburgh, Golders Green in London and Paris should suffer as a result of what is happening there?
Palestinians are being killed on a daily basis.
So is it justified, Omar?
Israel. And these people who are being attacked... Hello?
All right. I'm just asking you, Omar. So are you saying then that there is in fact some justification for anti-Semitic attacks that happen?
Yes.
Wow.
Because
Omar, how can those people that were praying yesterday in Pittsburgh, on the Jewish Sabbath, how should they as individuals in any way be held responsible for what is happening in Israel?
Before the state of Israel was created, they were not. Jews and Muslims have been living in that part of the world harmoniously for hundreds of years. And all of a sudden, this Zionist, racist, apartheid state you call the state of Israel was implanted in the Middle East. And since then, it's been nothing but death and destruction.
So basically, Omar, you are saying that all Jews are guilty, all Jews bear some responsibility.
At all. No.
Well, it sounds like you are.
No. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is this. Unfortunately, when atrocities are committed, the good and the bad will be affected. A bomb could be dropped in London, I'm going about my business, and I'm killed. Okay? I wasn't the cause of why somebody dropped that bomb. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. This is the reality. This is nature. So in any catastrophe, the good and the bad will be affected.
So basically, Pittsburgh is collateral damage, yeah?
Well, this is what, to coin a Western phrase, that's the phrase they use when they bomb people to oblivion. Wasn't it Paul Wolfowitz who said they're going to bomb me right back to the Stone Age?
Omar,
and they call it collateral damage.
Omar, we've heard your point. We've heard it very, very clearly. Thank you. Well, I was a little bit shocked by one or two of the things that Omar said there, but I did contend before the last break that this was in fact, when Nicole was on the phone, that it was in fact the conflict that is going on between Israel and Palestine that is at the root of much of this. And that phone call, I think, rather confirmed it. Nigel, I think if we educated children on the atrocities of World War II against the Jews and other minorities, I think people would grow up with a different view of Jewish people, says Mark in Sunderland. Mark, I'm not a massive fan of everything we do in British schools and universities, but I do think one thing that is taught pretty consistently is the Holocaust. So I think we've actually got that ground covered. I support Nicole and all Jews all over the world. Tell me what I can do and consider it done. Johnny in Norfolk has responded, Nicole, very much to your call. You do not know that if each and every one of the people in the synagogue whilst praying had toted a gun with willingness to use it, it's less likely the terrorist would have succeeded in killing 11 people. Trump is right, says someone called Donald. I'm sure it's not Donald himself. Well, you know, there is this argument, isn't there? You know, the reason we have an army is because other people have armies. But I think most of us, culturally, when we hear the American president say that, find it difficult to understand. We find it difficult to understand how more guns could make things safer. But if somebody had been sitting at the back of that synagogue armed yesterday, perhaps a lot of lives could be saved. However, against that, the more guns that are in open circulation, the more people get killed every year. I'm going to Finchley to speak to Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Nigel. Thank you so much for taking my call. I think the message I'd like to give is stop the lies. This is not aimed at you, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
The message to generally in your show is stop the lies about Jews and Israel. Like, for example, this guy, Omar, who ran just before.
Well, it was it really was a very extreme position he was putting, Mike, wasn't it?
Well, let me tell you, how many of your listeners, I want to know or realise that 850,000 Jews are persecuted and kicked out of Arab lands or had to flee for their lives since the 40s? How many of your listeners actually know that?
Yeah.
850,000. It wasn't just the Nazis that persecuted the Jews, okay? Just remember that.
And Mike, and Mike, add to that, how many Christians have fled from many of those countries in the last few years?
We could go on about many other groups that were persecuted. We're now talking about this attack that happened, and I think that the key here is the lies about Israel and about Jews. And, you know, you look at the attacks it's coming from. The far left, people like Corbyn, Emily Thornberry, in a party conference, says she supports any fight against anti-Semitism and so on, and then says in the same breath that she supports the Palestinians and she opposes the racist state of Israel. Well, this is another lie that people like her and Corbyn actually spread out. It's propaganda, it's misinformation, it's lies.
But Mike, even if their contention is right, even if Israel was a racist state, how does that make Jews in Pittsburgh, how should they be held accountable for what the state of Israel does? That's the bit that bothered me with the conversation with Omar.
Logic of extremists, both on the right, on the left, and I don't quite know how to say this, but extremist Islamists. And I'll give an example.
No, you're right.
I'll give an example. Look at the extremist Muslims that have been here in this country. Hamza, Bakri, Anjem Chowdhury. Guess what they all have in common? 100 support for Palestinians, led by Hamas, a terrorist organisation, and their hatred towards Israel.
And we've tolerated them. Mike, I'm going to move on. I'm going to go to Susan, a new caller from Pinner. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning. First time I've called your show. I'm Jewish. I'll get that out of the way. And you have to give me a minute because I'm shaking with rage at Omar.
Well, wasn't it all? It was awful. It was truly awful.
I have now I'm really frightened because I'm concerned about anti-Semitism in this country. My son works for one of the companies that protects the synagogues. He goes out every Saturday with a bulletproof vest. So now I'm even more worried for him. And I would say two things. One, we have had an enormous amount of bombs and offences by the Muslim community against the British community or whoever happened to be in the place at the time. So is all around the world. Does that mean we attack every Muslim in this country? Is that the correlation?
Quite.
These people are just breeding hatred, and it's got to stop. And also, I would say, with regard to the Labour Party, I think all of this is down to Jeremy Corbyn in this country because he has legitimised hating Jews. He correlates it with Israel. And the last point I would like to make, which I find quite astonishing, is there are hundreds of countries in the world which perpetrate the most appalling atrocities on their own people. If you look at Syria, if you look at Yemen, And yet, it's always Israel that comes under a target. A country the size of Wales who is desperately trying to survive. It is sent rockets on a daily basis. They have all the schools have underground safety areas. How is this not anti-Semitism? Why Israel? Because it's a Jewish state. Now, everybody liked it when we were all victims and we walk in quietly into the gas chambers. Not anymore. We will fight back.
Susan, thank you very much. And Susan, they're certainly providing some balance to what Omar said earlier. Some very, very strong criticism from several callers of Jeremy Corbyn. And I want to say, if anybody from the Labour Party wants to come back and challenge that perception that is held by quite a lot of people, 0345 6060 973. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It is now 11:30. Well, if Jews living all over the world are responsible for the actions of the Israeli state, then I think we've got a very real problem. I was quite shocked earlier that we had Omar from South London on the phone, basically saying that what happened in Pittsburgh yesterday with that massacre, that those people were collateral damage for, as he saw it, the evil behaviour of Israel and some Israelis. Really very, very disturbing. And lots of messages on this. Omar, no, you can't say that. It's justified. That's just wrong. Oh my God, Omar. And people blame the right for anti-Semitism. What kind of person would justify the killing like that, says Mandy in London. And Miles on Twitter says, wow, Omar on LBC right now saying that the shooting at the synagogue yesterday was justified because of the actions of Israel. This is someone from the UK in 2018. It is. And I think a lot of people are very, very shocked by what he said. Stephen is calling from Manchester. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, good morning.
Did you listen to that conversation I had with Omar?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a student. My family's been living here. My grandmother was born in the UK, and I've been living here for my whole life, obviously. I was born there.
Yeah.
I'm a young guy, obviously. I'm 22.
Yeah.
And I'm flabbergasted, but I don't actually know what to say. I'm in absolute shock.
Well, that was real. It was real, genuine hatred, wasn't it?
That was, but that's pure anti-Semitism on live radio. That's not even like on the street. My whole family is subject to. I mean, we've all been subject to anti-Semitism attacks over a number of different ways, and I don't get how he justifies that's allowed. I understand the criticism of different countries. Like, I'm not going to deny that our criticisms on both sides.
Well, perhaps Stephen.
How does that allow people to then slaughter people?
But perhaps Stephen, in one way, it was useful to hear him because it makes you realise. It makes you realise. I don't want to live in this country anymore. That makes me not want to live here anymore.
Well, I cannot. That's someone who's living in this country who thinks it's okay to take my life because of something that's happening halfway around the world. That's okay.
Don't judge the whole country by him, Stephen. Not one bit. Stephen, how concerned are you then? I mean, living in Manchester, how concerned are you about the rise of anti-Semitism?
Very. I mean, we know a couple of...
Omar aside,
yes,
just in general terms, do you think life has changed as a Jewish person over the last few years?
I mean, I'm 22 now. I mean, my first anti-Semitic attack, I remember when I was about 8 or 9, where these two guys who must have been 17, 18, came up to my brother and me, who were doing leaflets at the time in this area, and they were threatening to smash us up. And my brother literally just turned to me and said, run. There's nothing else you can do, just run. And so I ran and I left him. I left my older brother, who, by the way, wasn't anywhere near their age, and I just left him. So I think anti-Semitic attacks have been happening for a number of years. But I do feel there's a general unease starting to creep into the community. And like I said, we know survivors who aren't saying it's like pre-war times. They say we get hints of what it was like in Germany or Poland pre-war. We're getting like small glimpses.
And what's the driver, Stephen? What's the driver of this?
A lot of callers have said it, and I believe unfortunately the people we give the biggest platform to are the people that kick their legs the most, and that normally happens to be the people in the media, which happens to be normally small groups of people. So it'll be the extreme right, extreme left, and normally, unfortunately, I have to say, extreme Islamists. But it's not, like you say, it's not everyone, and a lot of people are standing up for us. The problem is that average people who are not going to get into the face of the media because they're not controversial and they don't kick their legs enough. Isn't like one of your callers earlier said. Yes, it's true, people do stand up for us, but when you got a leader of Her Majesty's opposition who cannot even stand up to defend Jewish people in the most basic of times, and that's the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, what are we expecting from the average person on the street? I don't know what people should expect.
No. Stephen, thank you very much for making those points. Again, yet another caller saying that actually when the leader of Her Majesty's opposition allows some pretty unpleasant things to be said within his own party, is it any surprise this problem is becoming more widespread? And I say, once again, if you're a Jeremy Corbyn supporter and you think this is completely wrong, then do call 0345 6060 973. Shelby says, I've never had an issue with the Jewish people in this country. They work hard and contribute. Helena says, Jewish people are friendly, hard-working, and most importantly, they integrate. Scotty says, what causes the problem is a lack of knowledge and understanding of religion. Omar's call still stirring you up. Lots and lots of messages still coming in on that. Paul is calling from Barnet. Paul, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you.
I, like many others, I think I'm just outraged by the. I'm going to say a couple of things which might be quite difficult for people to hear, but it's not this Omar. It's not the words. It's not the behaviour. He is a nailed-on, intellectually bankrupt racist, and he's living in a society that allows this to go on. It supports it. It fosters it. It festers in our society.
But how do you stop it, Paul?
I tell you what, it pushes normal, liberal, let's say well-educated people to extremes. And I think the Jewish community has been too meek and too mild and allowed these revolting views and people who harbour these views to get on with it. I think it's time to, the time is to stand up to this.
Now, Paul,
earlier on,
Paul, we had Nicole, who rang us up, and I've never spoken to her before, and she felt, fairly or unfairly, but she felt that not enough British people were standing up for the Jewish community. Do you think she had a point?
Well, I don't know what the data is, but it's probably, I see so much more in our news about issues, many other issues, obviously flooded with Brexit. While that's been happening, it seems like the whole of the country has been put on pause, which is bizarre. But all these other issues that crop up, and I'm not minimising it, but the LGB, the press that's going on around that, which is, let's face it, a very small percentage of our society in the 2016 ONS survey.
Yeah.
No more than 2% of people will have identified with that community. And I'm fine. I've got no issues with it at all. But there seems to be a hell of a lot more newsprint and words and media about that than about other disgusting intolerances that this society is allowing.
Paul, you've argued that point very, very well. Thank you for the call. I'm going to Golders Green to speak to Jocelyn, a new caller to this show. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. The first thing that strikes me about any of these calls, which is the most terrifying thing for me, I'm full disclosure, I'm Jewish. Full disclosure, I don't agree with your policies particularly. But what frightens me about any of this is that we go straight to the point of hating each other. And this polarization of discourse, we go straight to the point of, it's Israel's fault, it's Jeremy Corbyn's fault, I don't support him either. But we don't actually look at the facts. And the facts about this situation specifically is that this guy targeted the Jewish community, A, because he was vehemently anti-Semitic,
yep.
And 2, he hated them because they were trying to help refugees and help immigration into America.
Yep.
And that, for me, as a Jewish person, is the most important thing we can do. I'm very lucky to be fourth-generation British. I'm very, very lucky that my family weren't directly affected by what happened in the Second World War. At the same time, I feel like we are deeply responsible to help other people who are persecuted. And we are missing the point of this whole situation. And Omar is missing the point of this entire situation, which is these people are being shot at and killed for trying to help his people and for being Jewish primarily, and secondarily for trying to help his people. And the polarization of this discourse, which is, these people are terrible, they're killing people in Israel, the Palestinians, all of this stuff is absolute rubbish. What these people were trying to do was help people who are being persecuted out of Arab states. And that has been totally missed by every single caller, including the Jewish callers. And as I said, not a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, and, you know, not a supporter of, certainly not a supporter of what the Baroness Tong was saying. Tong, I think is absolutely disgusting. But everybody's missing the point, which is these people were trying to do the right thing by both Jewish and Arab people, and that's been entirely missed by every single caller I've heard so far on this show.
And that is the point about giving refugee status to those that genuinely qualify for it, yeah?
Absolutely, and I think I genuinely believe, like, as I said, I'm Jewish, I'm fourth generation British. My mother has been out to try and help the refugees in Thessaloniki. I've done work to try and raise funds for various charities who help refugees, because I feel like it's my responsibility as a Jewish person to help other people who have had similar situations to what my ancestors had. At the same time, it is what frightens me most is that everybody goes to the left or the right and to blame all the different people without looking at the facts. And I think that's the most important thing.
There's a lot of polarity, Jocelyn. That is certainly true. Thank you for calling. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It's now 11:45. The worst ever anti-Jewish attack in America takes place in Pennsylvania. I'm asking why anti-Semitism is growing. I'm told by experts from the Jewish community it is growth in the far right, growth in the far left, and growth of extreme Islamism. I have to say, for me, all of this seems to centre around that Palestinian Israeli conflict, but I was really shocked earlier when one caller, Omar, seemed to say that because of the, as he saw it, evil behaviour of Israel and many Israelis, that meant, to some extent, Jewish people around the world were responsible for that. That was shocking. It's led to a massive response from LBC callers. I'll try and get through a few of you if I can. Ben is a new caller from Barnet. Ben, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, you heard what Omar had to say, Ben.
So I did, and to be honest, I'm not actually that surprised.
Really?
It really saddens me how the lives of so many were taken away by the act of one sick individual, followed by anti-Zionist sentiments. You know, these people are arguing whilst families are mourning, people's lives are taken away, and the community is still shaking. And I don't understand why, whenever an attack on the Jewish community happens, people feel the need to justify it with mentioning Israel. Why can't people allow the Jewish community to mourn the loss of lives taken away? It's not about Israel or Palestine or the Israeli government. These were Jews praying in a synagogue, and to even make comparisons, I think, shows how much we fall in a society that we have to justify the killing of Jews to the world. I don't think this will be tolerated in any other religion or culture. And I think that any form of this anti-Semitic rhetoric needs to be completely shut down straight away. And we need to stop putting the blame and actually think there are lives lost here. We need to just stop blaming around other countries or policies and just
But
remember
the trouble is, Ben, as we saw from Omar, there clearly are some, maybe not very many, but there are clearly some people out there that do think that.
I don't think Omar really cares about the Palestinian people. I think Omar has an anti-Semitic agenda, and he's trying to push that, and he's using the conflict as a way.
As a means.
Where does it stop? Should we start blaming attacks on the Muslim community for extremist groups? Should we blame attacks on the Christian community because of their extremist groups? Should we blame...
No, quite. Quite. No, Ben, I get the point. Thank you. Rob on Facebook says everything lately has become us or them. It's all very unhealthy. I get a message here. To Sue in Pinner, for a first-time caller, you had great courage and chose the exact words to sum up the entire sorry state of the anti-Semitic perception of Israel today. Many thanks for your extremely well-thought-out and clear vision on the subject, says Robin. So there we are. First-time callers, don't be scared. If you believe something strongly in your heart, pick up the phone and tell us. Jonathan is a new caller from Watford. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm okay. Still a little bit shocked by what Omar said half an hour ago.
Well, I have to be honest, I'm not as shocked as I would have been a few years ago. I won't take much of your time. Ultimately, we need to start working together to stop the problem. It's not us, it's not them. I'm wondering if Omar would agree if somebody walked into a mosque and shot dead 11 people, that it was because Hamas were firing rockets into Israel. Would he accept that that was collateral damage?
I did kind of ask him that, Jonathan. He kind of said, well, you can't compare a couple of rockets to what the Israelis are doing. So I don't think he would necessarily have listened to logic. But you said something at the start there that was interesting. You're less shocked than you would have been a few years ago.
Well, because unfortunately we've seen a rise of anti-Semitism and nobody seems prepared to do anything about it. Now, everybody focuses on Corbyn, and yes, there's a lot of problems with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. That doesn't mean that there aren't problems on the right as well. No. Ultimately, everyone should start to pull together and say, okay, this is a big problem, it's getting worse, what are we going to do to stop it? And to be honest, having listened to Donald Trump last night saying that everything would have been okay had there been an armed guard in the synagogue, is that really the kind of country that he wants to live in, where every place of worship needs an armed guard so that people can pray and worship the Lord that they want to worship in peace without the risk of somebody walking in saying all Jews need to die and 11 people get shot dead? That troubles me, Nigel, that... Listen, I'm not a Trump fan, full disclosure. Lots of people aren't. But it troubles me that the President of the United States is excusing not blaming the Jewish community, but saying, okay, if you've got a guard in the synagogue, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
well, I mean, it's a very... Because all that happens...
And in fact, Jonathan, to be fair, he's used this argument too about teachers being attacked in schools, and there is a big cultural difference both sides of the pond on guns. Jonathan, thanks for your call. Going to try and get through a few more if I can. Sophie is a new caller from Wanstead. Good morning, Sophie.
Hello, Nigel. I have to say I'm really, really very, very angry. Number one, I'm not for any man. I'm not for a Jewish person, a Muslim person. I'm for every man. I'm for humanity. And I think society is so full of hatred at the moment. It's just revolting. And this is not the kind of society I was born into. And we need to look at what we're becoming, number one. And full disclosure, I am a Muslim. Yep. I don't agree with what Omar said. I'm horrified, and he does not represent the majority of Muslims. But what I will say, I'm very, very perplexed. There's been a lot of talk about anti-Semitism, which is wrong, and Muslims. Can I just point out, this man was a white American, and no one has mentioned that.
Sophie, I've mentioned it twice so far this morning. I've mentioned it twice, and in fact, when we did, talk to Richard Ferrer earlier about this, he made the point that there are three key reasons for the rise of anti-Semitism. One of those reasons is extreme Islam, but clearly a growth of the far right and far left are part of it too. So, Sophie, I was pretty clear about that.
These people are full of hatred, and they don't care who they harm or hurt. You mentioned a school, and a few years ago, about 140 children, Muslim children, are killed in Peshawar by a Muslim fanatic killing Muslim children. So they're not against white people, they're not against black people, they're not against liberals, they're against everyone. That includes me, who's a British Muslim, and that includes you, who's a white Christian British man.
Sophie, thanks for your call. I don't imagine Jeremy Corbyn is remotely worried about the Labour Jewish vote, as the number of eligible Jews able to vote is tiny. Bearing in mind the Jewish community in the UK is approximately 250,000, says Tanya. Tanya, there is a very small Jewish population in this country. Not that that justifies any of the things that Omar said earlier. It absolutely doesn't. Aaron is my last caller on this subject today. Another new caller from Cricklewood. Good morning, Aaron.
Hi, good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I'm well. Well, I think we all agree there is a growing problem. Do you have any solutions for us?
Look, the reality is, I was saying, like homophobia has always existed and it's always been hidden. Now it's open. Racism is always there. It's never going to change, whatever you do. But I think the key thing that we can try to solve is education for young children and the way the media is being portrayed. That's the reality.
Well, the education, Aaron, I said earlier, quite clearly, quite categorically, that one thing I did feel confident of was that children in schools were taught about the Holocaust. And yet, I get this. My daughter attended a Catholic school in Surrey, and age 14, only herself and one other child in the class knew what the Holocaust was. So there we are. That knocks my theory into a cocked hat. So maybe we're not educating people about this.
Exactly. That is the key. Education. When the child is young and they absorb the knowledge, that's the fundamental idea. But we're not pushing it. If we make it a key thing, then it will maybe solve more issues.
Okay. No, Aaron, I think the point about education is a very, very well-made one. Thank you. Well, we have literally had an avalanche of phone calls and messages since Omar called up earlier, and it is very worrying to hear someone say that because of the actions of a state, everybody of that religion is guilty. And if the boot was on the other foot and we were talking about blaming everybody of the religion of Islam because of the behaviour of some extremists, that argument would be exactly the same too. Worrying that we have people like that living in London. But we do. I'm back tomorrow. It's budget day. I'll be on air from 6. Coming up this afternoon at 3 o'clock, it's Ian Payne. But up next, it's Kevin Maguire.
Thanks, Nigel. You have a nice day.